Rachel Davis DuBois, who was born Rachel Davis to a Quaker farm family in Salem County outside of Woodstown in 1890, pardon me, 1892. And she worked on the farm as a child, one of 6 children, and they were a Quaker family at the Woodstown meeting. And she had lots of motivation and ambitions, and she graduated from Bucknell University in 1914 to become a high school teacher. Now, from that beginning, in her 101 years, she died in 1993 in Woodstown, she was known throughout the became known throughout the United States and indeed the world. And I'm going to try this morning to talk about her journey and the things that made her grow, and then the things that or the people that and organizations that she influenced throughout the country and throughout some difficult times that the country had throughout most of her life. So the theme that I'm thinking of is, well, how did she get there? How did she get from that farm family in Woodstown and then Bucknell to the wider world? Because ultimately, she had achieved her doctorate degree at Columbia, at Teachers College of Columbia University in education. She had developed a method of gathering people together and uniting, called the group conversation method. She was esteemed by leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr. and other notables like that. So I'm going to talk about how she got there. Now I'm going to try to share 1 or 2 photos, but I've been disabled from doing that, I see. Host disabled screen sharing. If we can correct that, we will, but if we can't, we won't. I only have a couple anyway, so it's not critical.
I think you have to make him host.
No. All you do is go into security at the bottom where it says security and allow him to share his screen. You see that, Lois? In security.
Security and screen share is allowed.
Okay.
And when I look at screen share, I've got
I can get there.
Multiple participants can share.
Yeah, I think I can get there. Can you all see this? What I've just thrown up?
Yeah.
Which is a drawing, a mural. Can you see that?
No.
It has to be participants share. You have to allow participants to share. Do you want to pass host back to me and I'll work on it?
Tell me how to do that and I'll be glad to give it back.
Okay, go into participants and click on my name.
Okay, participants. And Paul.
Right.
More. Make host.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, now let me see. Okay, so it does show participants can share
All right, let's try that.
And I'm making you back, I'm passing host back to you. I don't want to, I'm not.
Now I tried it again. If it didn't work though,
Mm.
if it didn't work, I'm going to skip it. What I want to say is I want to be off and running. She went to Bucknell. She graduated in 1914, and she started teaching high school in Glassboro, New Jersey. And as a matter of fact, early in life, she married her high school sweetheart, Nathan DuBois, who was also from Woodstown. And together, they attended a World Conference of Quakers, of Friends in London in 1920. And that was a life-changing event for Rachel. Because at that World Conference in London, they were talking about the poor treatment that Black World War I Army participants, soldiers, had received in the Army, and most especially when they went back home to the South, where many of them were from. And they talked about deplorable conditions for Black people in the South. And they also talked about race issues in the US, such as bloody riots that had been in Chicago that focused about race. Now, Rachel, it's written, found that she knew nothing about any of this, that she was in total ignorance of this. And although she was a college graduate, she'd never been enlightened about that. Now, she had always been a very strong believer in pacifism, civil rights, equality, even as a young girl and as a college student. And as a matter of fact, when she was teaching at Glassboro before this conference, she refused to participate in any war bonds sales because she felt that it was against her principles of pacifism. And so the high school administration wanted to fire her, but they were not successful in doing that. But this is an example of many times when she met disfavor and overcame it, or ignored it. And we'll see many examples of that throughout her life. Now, what she did, however, after the trip, the conference in London, she quit her job as a teacher and she went to the South. She went with a Philadelphia a Quaker organization to the South, and it was the Pennsylvania Committee on the Abolition of Slavery, and they went to the South to try to deal with the deplorable conditions of Blacks there. And there she learned firsthand what discrimination was all about and what it was about in the South. Now, she's on a mission of learning, but she's ultimately on a mission of acting. And that characterizes her whole life. Because from there, on her learning journey, she went to Chicago, where Jane Addams of Hull House was working. And she worked with Jane Addams. Jane Addams was at Hull House in a poverty-stricken section of Chicago. And so now Rachel Davis DuBois is, and I'm going to use the term DuBois rather than Dubois because my friends in Woodstown say DuBois, so I will. Rachel learned about the extreme poverty in Chicago. And she learned from Jane Addams, who preached that it was the interaction and cooperation of different classes and ethnicities that could affect change, that could make change. Jane Addams believed that there had to be cooperation between and working between classes and ethnicities in order to affect change. And she taught Rachel Davis. Now, in 1924, Rachel Davis returned to New Jersey as a teacher, and she went to work in Woodbury High School, which is noteworthy because she was put in charge of student assemblies. And she went to work because she noticed that the speakers at the student assemblies had no effect on the students and were not being paid attention to by the students. And Rachel blamed that on the speakers, not the students. So she had already in her travels and in her thoughtful studies picked up some methods of John Dewey in modern education, and she developed the assemblies so that they would be participating assemblies with the students, so that she would bring people into the assemblies that the students could be interested in and who were different from the students. Woodbury High School had largely white students at that time and Protestant students. So she brought in some Black ministers. She brought in some Jewish rabbis. She brought in some Polish Catholic priests. And she made it interesting for the students. Now, she developed a method whereby she would break into small groups and they would talk about things they all had in common, the speakers, the students. And she would use it as a socializing time. And then the students would become much more receptive on whatever the program was. And the program was designed by Rachel to let students know about people who were not like the students. Rachel Davis had a favorite saying through her life, and that is, the not me in thee is what attracts thee to me. The not me in thee is what attracts thee to me. So that's what she was trying to do with these students. Now, the administration again tried to fire her because she was emphasizing in these assemblies racial equality, women's rights, and pacifism. Now this, as I say, was in the 20s. And so the local Woodbury administration and towns officials didn't like her subjects, her messages, and they tried to fire her, but they were not successful. In 1931, however, she began to work toward her advanced degree at Teachers College in Columbia. Now, she had formulated in her studies at Columbia the practices that she had developed, and it was called by others the Woodbury Project from Woodbury High School. And for many years, her method was called the Woodbury Method or the Woodbury Project. Now, what she did is she came to Philadelphia and she enlisted the assistance of a Quaker lady in Philadelphia, an African-American named Dr. Harriet Rice, who was at what my literature says is the American Friends Center in Philadelphia. Now, I don't know whether that's the American Friends Service or what it is, but it was called the American Friends Center. Dr. Harriet Rice was employed there. And Dr. Rice was so impressed with Rachel that she left with Rachel to go to New York City, where Rachel was a student. And together, they worked on and developed Rachel's methods of enabling people to learn about different people and different ethnicities. Now, they called it the Intercultural Education Movement. And I have learned that that became a major movement in education in the United States, the Intercultural Education Movement. And Dr. Rice and Rachel worked on this together in New York City, in both Columbia and also at NYU, where Rachel finished her doctorate degree. Now, what they did is they developed pamphlets and speakers programs, and they started to enlist and avail themselves to other organizations about this method. And they developed programs to present, which included music, art, and cultural artifacts of different American and micro-American cultures, so that they were aiming to make different aspects of society more appealing to other groups. Now, these pamphlets and publications and programs, and incidentally, Rachel authored or co-authored 17 books or pamphlets in the course of her career. They became greatly in demand, and so did the intercultural education movement. And so at this time, she completed her doctorate at the same time at NYU, but she also completed her marriage because Nathan DuBois and she separated it and divorced at this time. And Rachel had moved way on. I might add that I have read that as a very young woman, Rachel very much wanted to have children, but her husband either could not or would not have children. And so Rachel had decided on an ambitious path instead of having children. So her marriage ended, but she was now on her way. And after the war, she lectured on World War II now. She lectured on group conversation in cities throughout the United States. She was also sent by the State Department after World War II to teach this method in Germany, in West Germany, that the US was in charge of rehabilitating after the war. Now, at this point, I think that I ought to talk about a little about what group conversation is, because I gave this talk down at Woodstown, and they wanted to know, well, it sounds a little amorphous. Exactly what is group conversation? The methods that Rachel developed and that were so much in demand. Well, what her program was, and I quote now, when a small number of people, it could be anywhere from 10 to 30, take an hour in order and share common memories, no matter where they came from, what class or ethnicity. Everybody has some common memories, often out of childhood or early school. And she would make a period of time in which there would be a sharing of common memories. And it takes a skilled leader to do that, but through a little period of time doing that, the group, it develops trust and a relaxed acceptance of one another. And then they can explore what they have to tell one another, and it will be accepted by the group because they've already established this identifying period of time. And she called it a time period for relaxing, getting to know one another, and sharing the common experiences which everybody will have one way or another. And I'll give just an example or two. I think I really need to take the time to do that. What I'm doing, what's telling you now, is from a book that I bought online. It set me back $15. And I say that it's called Reducing Social Tension and Conflict, which she authored in 1971. It was a library book at West Kentucky University, and so I got it from Amazon. There's another book whose a picture of which I'm going to show you that the Woodstown Meeting House owns. And I tried to buy that online. I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. Maybe I'll show it now. But Amazon wanted $890 for a used copy. They're out of print, I think. So I didn't spend the $890. It's more or less of an autobiography. So instead of doing that, I took a lot of material out of the book I just showed you. Now, I think I'm going to show you now the book. Maybe I'll show you a couple things. I want to move on here. Give me 1 second. Oh, I guess I'm not going to do it. Wait a minute here. Well, I'm going to skip that for a minute. And another example, I want to give you another example. That's my bad. I just couldn't do it. Another example of group conversation. And she does distinguish between group conversation and group discussion. Group conversation is where you relax and begin to accept whatever the other people have to say in the group. Now, another example of that that's in the book, there are actually many examples. She talks about a workshop in the South with women. And it was a in-person weekend retreat of Black women and white women. And in the course of the retreat being organized, a number of the white Southern women felt uncomfortable with the fact that they would all be staying together for the weekend, both Black women and white women. So the leader of the group conversation had the women start to share memories of when they were little girls, what the kinds of things they experienced at breakfast and what they had for breakfast and what they shared. And in the South, some of them, both Black and white, they would have, their families would have big breakfasts that involved bacon or ham from hogs that they killed themselves, on the farm. And so they explored what they felt about as children about the killing of these hogs. And that kind of almost silly conversation so relaxed the group that they could really start to bond, and the problem they were having just disappeared. Now, what Rachel would do is, or anybody else who was using the group conversation method, is you would go through that period. It was not a waste of time. It was essential before you got to group discussion. Group discussion is when you were going to attack problems that everybody knew existed. For example, why was there still segregation in schools in the South, and what shall we do about it? And you could have some meaningful conversation which would lead to actions, but you could only do it if you had started out with the group conversation before the group discussion, in order that everybody is on the same page. Now, it sounds perfectly simple, but the amount of demand that she attracted resulted in eventually, as the decades wore on, and she was admired by the civil rights leader, A. Philip Randolph, and also the writer Langston Hughes. She was introduced to Martin Luther King Jr. And Martin Luther King Jr. was so impressed by what he learned that he asked Rachel to come down to the Southern Leadership Conference in the South and hold staff education sessions in group conversation and group discussion. And she did that for 2 years for Martin Luther King Jr. at the Southern Leadership Conference, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And that was in 1965, only a couple of years before Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. And up to King's assassination, she was in pretty constant contact with Martin Luther King Jr. because he had grown to admire her methods so much. Another Black leader that had an impression on her and that she impressed was Bayard Rustin here in Philadelphia. And Bayard Rustin, of course, was first of all a pacifist before, and very active in pacifism, which was Rachel's original love and original passion. And Bayard Rustin became very active in civil rights and issues of discrimination. And so did Rachel. So they were, that was another Philadelphia connection for Rachel, and it was another kindred spirit. She had a long history of kindred spirits. Many, many years, decades before, she had established a close relationship with W.E.B. Du Bois. No relation, but they often joked about that. And actually, I've read in some of this information that Rachel, when she was in New York, she was somewhat dark complected and would pass for Black. And apparently W.E.B. Du Bois and she often joked about being related. Of course, they could have been. They might be. So she came back to Woodstown in 1973 in retirement. In 1983, she was 91, and she was obviously well known by this point, and she was celebrated. The local newspaper, as a celebration in February of 1983 of Black History Month, did their feature article and interview with Rachel. And she continued to work in Woodstown now. She'd been away all her life after leaving Woodbury High School, but now she retired and returned to the family farm, or a farmhouse on the property outside of Woodstown. And I went down to speak to the Friends Village at Woodstown a month ago, and I learned there, well, first of all, they were very interested because they have a Rachel Davis DuBois building at Woodstown, but many of the residents in this retirement home, the Friends Retirement Village, have no idea who she was. So that's why they invited me to speak. Now, my own high school Sunday school teacher, with whom I'm still friendly, invited me down there. She's a very active force at the Friends Village Retirement Center. Incidentally, she's 95. And she knew Rachel Davis DuBois. Her daughter-in-law worked closely with Rachel in Rachel's retirement. And I found that a husband and wife participant in my talk who live at Friends Village knew her because ultimately, before she died, Rachel died at 101 years of age in 1993. She herself lived at Friends Village at Woodstown. And they grew to know her. And without paying $890, they have a copy of that same autobiography that's autographed by Rachel. Now, what I want to do, and I don't know where our time is, but I just want to be sure I get this in. I want to give some attribution of my sources. Why shouldn't I? I should act professionally. I grew to know about Rachel through Lois, who sent me an email, which was an article from the Journal of Educational Biography that was called All Cultures Matter. And it describes the intercultural education movement after the Second World War, and it was a source of a lot of this information. And then after that, I also found that there's a Quaker history at Swarthmore College website, and they have put online a lot of this. It's the Friends Historical Society of Swarthmore College, and they put a good bit of information about Rachel Davis DuBois on their website. So that was another source of it. And then the Woodstown meeting has the articles and the newspaper articles, the book that I couldn't buy, and some of Rachel's leaflets in an archive of Rachel Dubois. So I don't, Lois, I don't know where we are on time. I could just open it up at this point. It's 12:21 actually. I think I've covered most of what I wanted to say.
When was her book published?
Aha. I don't know the answer to that. Because the little book that I have was 1971. So I'm not sure when her autobiography was published. I can give you the name of it. It's called All This and Something More, Pioneering in Intercultural Education by Rachel Davis DuBois. It looks like I have a question. Oh no. Do I have any questions?
See, a book like that, if it's really interesting and it's important, you could, I don't know if you could, but someone could contact the person who inherited her estate, and you can type it all in again into Project Gutenberg so that it's available for everyone. I mean, there are ways around things.
Yeah, yeah. Incidentally, I hesitate to mention this. You know, I think I mentioned it to somebody before. It's kind of it almost detracts. In Salem County, we're all related to one another. If I spent my life there until I retired, and if your family came a long time ago in the 17th or 18th century, you're related. And I was sent the evidence by someone interested in archives that Rachel Davis DuBois is my sixth cousin.
Yeah.
Which is not surprising because probably a great many people in Salem County are my sixth cousin. But when you said her estate, that I'm not part of her estate, but I am her sixth cousin.
Well, someone must have executed her estate. Someone must own her.
I know. That's easy to find out.
Yeah.
I was the judge there, for God's sake. I should be able to find out.
There you go.
Tom, when you were working on this project, did you find much evidence of those methods being used in today's education or in other practices?
Let me mention this. Two days ago or earlier in the week, I was on a FITCI program here in Philly, a Zoomed a FITCI seminar, and it was called Conversations with Your Black Friend Christopher. And it was, as a result, it was organized by Joan Countryman, who's the many things, but she's the chair of Friends in the City, a nonprofit corporation. And I know this conversation with your Black friend Christopher, this is what Christopher, who's a friend of Joan's, he does professionally. And I could, as I participated in the Zoom program this week, I could tell it was the classic case of group conversation. And, you know, I only know that because of all this reading that I've been doing, but it was like a book letter case of group conversation. Now, I don't know what he's had a lot of training. So, you know, I think it's immortalized, this method, because boy, he was using it. And he was asking us some questions to try to, and there was chat, you know, in order to try to identify with one another. And then he was what he was really, it was mostly white folks getting a chance to interact with a Black man. It was the method. It was the group conversation method. Maybe he was trained in it. I was curious.
Well, I might add that Interfaith Philadelphia, which is a group that's trying to foster interfaith relationships, they also do a lot with a very similar technique called civil conversations. And I've participated in several of their programs. But it just picks up on so much of how you described what Rachel pioneered.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing about it, and I think Lois and I both probably had this impression, it's so timely. It's so timely. It couldn't be more timely. Yeah. Really. I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
But you know, I guess I'm repeating myself. When my biggest impression of Rachel was how she came from being a farm girl working on the farm, born in 1892, how far she pushed herself and how she grew incredibly, and how she was able to absorb so much and then give so much.
It reminds me of Alice Paul, who was kind of in this similar generation, and who also came from a farm in New Jersey.
Ah, Alice Paul, the artist?
No, the suffragette.
Oh, Alice Paul. Yeah, I know who you mean. I'm thinking of Alice Neal. That's
Another
different. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's amazing. My English grandmother was born in 1892, of course, in England. And that generation, yeah, they went through the First World War, well, where everyone around, all the young men were being killed. And then the Second World War, when their children were being killed.
Yeah.
I mean, more so in England than in the United States, but certainly there were plenty of people killed in the First and Second World War in the United States. So that was. Do you, how do we get this training?
The training?
Yeah, how do we get the training?
I don't know.
Well, I could suggest checking with Interfaith Philadelphia. You could check their website and see what they have for civil conversations training.
Yeah.
They offer it periodically.
Civil conversations, that is the key word. Civil conversations.
Right. Yeah.
Well, coincidentally, the presentation next month will be very much along the same lines. Karen Tibbles will be doing explaining how to get in a position to have a civil conversation by recognizing differences in values and similarities in values. And I believe Lois has a handout for Karen's presentation next month. But it is a nice follow-on to Tom's presentation.
Tom, do you edit in Wikipedia?
No, what do you mean edit?
Well, I can show you how to do it. I would love you to put a lot of this stuff in her Wikipedia profile.
Oh gosh.
Is it? Yeah, it's very easy to do.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I can certainly show you how to do it.
Yeah. That's, I'll take you on that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Gosh, it's my immortality, isn't it?
absolutely.
Absolutely.
We can do a profile of you too. Why not?
No, it's already there. It's already there.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
We can alter that too.
Oh dear.
But yeah.
Well, thank you, Tom. That was really good and a lot to think about. And an impressive woman, impressive person.
Yeah. It was
Thank you.
so much fun for me, and it was so much fun to go down to Woodstown, really. You know. Well, I guess that's all I have.
Okay, then I will stop
Thank you.
recording.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it very much, Tom. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. That's
was
great to hear.
Thanks, Tom. This was really inspiring.
It was.
There's an effect.
Thanks, Tom.
Oh, I'm so grateful to hear that. I really am.
Loved it.
Okay.
Okay, well, we have an education committee meeting on Tuesday. Maybe